Hey everybody, Questwise here, and in today's video, if you haven't already guessed from the title down below, this is going to be a video more about Pulp Alley and a conversation I had yesterday or day before with somebody on one of the Pulp Alley players, the Facebook page. And this was a new person who was new to the hobby, new to Pulp Alley, which always gets me really excited because I love it when people are still discovering Pulp Alley, because to me, Pulp Alley is one of those games that was introduced to me a very short period of time ago, maybe a couple of years ago, and has quickly, for me at least, risen to the very top of all skirmish game rules on the market. The question we were having is I had posted a picture about a Predator, like Predator versus Aliens, figure that I had ordered from Etsy, and how I was very excited about getting this figure and running games of Pulp Alley with it. And the question was that, can you do games outside of this sort of 1930s pulp action genre that Pulp Alley is sort of originally marketed for? This is a game that was introduced to me a few years back by a friend, and is just one of the best games on the market. And we have sat down together, my friend and I, and we have tried to break this game, and we cannot do it. And by break, I mean we've dropped every conceivable genre into this game to see if it would work, and it has worked beautifully every single time. That's just the beauty of these rules. It's just the sort of generic, and I use that term, I hate that term because it makes it sound like it's very blah, but it's a very generic, well-rounded rule set that can easily adapt itself to anything you want it to do. What I want to talk about today, and I want to talk a little bit about the power of Pulp Alley, and what I want to show you today is a project I'm currently working on, and it's something I'm hoping is going to work out very, very well. I'm a huge fan of crossover fictions. I love it when, like, comic book artists, in particular, like Freddie Williams, the first one that comes to my mind, when he did this crossover between Masters of the Universe and Thundercats. And then there was, like, Batman and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There's some great crossovers. I love crossover fiction. I love visitation fiction. People from our world going to fantasy worlds or post-apocalyptic worlds and trying to figure out how to survive and how to thrive in a society that they maybe have only ever read about in fictional tales. Those are my favorite things to read and collect. One of my other favorite things, if you've been a follower of the channel for a while, one of my other just near and dear to my heart are Robert E. Howard's stories. I love his writing styles. I love his the way that he envisions characters. I love his settings. He's best known for Conan the Barbarian, right? But he also is very famous for a lot of other characters. Bran MacMorn, the Pictish King, Solomon Kane, El Borak, just a bevy of characters that he's created and stories that he wrote. Boxing stories, romances, horror stories, westerns. He's done it all, and all sort of fitting into that sort of pulp era of the 1920s and 30s. And I just love his work. It's one of my favorite things to collect. It's one of my favorite things to study. I've read just about everything, I believe, that he has ever published, even some of the synopsis stories that he's written and that he wrote that was never fleshed out, some of the tales that he has begun and never finished. What I want to talk to you about today, and how I want to show you the power of Pulp Alley, is that last free comic book day, Titan Comics, who now holds the license for all things, at least comic book wise, for Conan the Barbarian or Robert Howard's works in general, they took that over from Marvel Comics, if you remember that short period of time. Anyway, if you get a chance, go check out Savage Avengers, Conan with the Avengers. It's beautiful. But Titan Comics has taken this over, and last free comic book day, they came out with this. It's a prelude to an ongoing series that actually comes out next week, September 4th, 2024. So next week from the time I'm filming this video, and I'm super excited about checking this out. But it's called the Battle of Blackstone. And I picked this up from my local comic book store, Top Comics here in Traverse City. And this is sort of a prelude to the series and kind of sets up what exactly this whole series is about. And it's an original tale, but being held very, very true to Howard's vision and Howard's characters, written by Jim Zub, who's a fantastic writer and somebody who can envision some great stuff, and a true Robert E. Howard fan. The premise of this story, though, is very, very unique. He is, in many of Robert Howard's stories, he's often talked about this mysterious black stone with a sigil that's etched into the stone. It almost looks like an archaic eyeball, right? It's this sort of like mysterious, strange eyeball, and it affects every character that Robert Howard has written. As far as I believe, there may be one that I'm that was not sort of introduced to this at all, this concept at all, but it's always had a very sort of deep spiritual, horrific effect on the characters whenever they encounter this thing. What they're going to be doing with the Battle of Blackstone is they're going to be taking Robert Howard's characters, and it's going to be telling a story, sort of a crossover story of each of these characters and how they were affected by this sigil, right? It all begins with a character named James Allison that Howard concocted, and James Allison has been affected by some affliction, right? He's partially paralyzed, and his only means of escape is writing. And I believe that this is and it's pretty blatantly evident that James Allison is sort of an alter ego for Robert E. Howard. If you know anything about Robert E. Howard, he grew up in Cross Plains, Texas, or lived there till his untimely demise. But a small little Texas town, and you're talking like in the 30s, right, 20s and 30s. There was not really a way for him, a very boring place, right? And his imagination was his only escape, and he loved to read history and older fairy tales, and his imagination concocted all these different worlds between King Kull of Atlantis and Conan the Cimmerian, Solomon Kane, the Puritan, fighting against evil and demonic forces. And this was his sort of outlet to write these characters. It's pretty evident that he's talking about things, especially through the character of James Allison, that they're sort of reliving what they believe were past lives, this idea of reincarnation over the ages. There's been several instances where Robert Howard has said that Conan actually spoke to him in his dreams and had whispered these stories to him, and he felt as if they had actually happened to him. So there's this wild idea of reincarnation, that maybe Robert Howard thought himself the reincarnation of Conan and Solomon Kane and all these other characters that he had created, as well as some of them being very strong, prominent women as well too, like Red Sonja and Dark Agnes. And we'll get to those in a minute. But what Jim Zub's going to be doing in this series, in the Battle of Blackstone, is it starts off with James Allison and him writing this story and having this sort of this memory, as it were, of something that had happened to Conan, and Conan having and then crossing over into that world, into Hyperborea, right? Conan having this experience, and from what I understand of the series, it's going to explore each of these characters, and each of these characters that have been listed so far are going to be Conan the Barbarian, James Allison, of course. We're going to be talking about Solomon Kane. He's going to be in it as well. El Borak, who is a Texas gunfighter who ended up in like Southeast Asia on crazy adventures during the 30s and 40s and stuff. if you haven't read any of these, that's some great tales as well. Dark and Agnes and a few other women that have come out of the stories that he wrote, collected in this series. This is a fantastic series too. By if you haven't had a chance to pick this up, I have all of them except for one. I think I'm missing one copy. This is a Del Rey trade book, I believe. I don't believe they're in publication anymore, but you can find them on the secondary market. But Sword Women and Other Historical Adventures. This whole series is beautiful. Lots of stories in here about Dark Agnes. The only one, a couple other characters too, that are sort of lumped into some of these other stories, would be John Conrad, who was a hard-nosed detective. John Kirwan, who was like an occult investigator and a librarian. These are all characters that's going to be part of this sort of ongoing crossover series. The only one I think they've missed, and that is not mentioned in the Prelude Free Comic Book Day edition, is Bran Mac Morn. This is a Pictish king who fought against the Celts and the Romans. Very historical adventures, but some crossovers with Conan and King Kull of Atlantis. I don't remember. I'm excited to dive back into all of these and reread a bunch of these stories. I don't remember if there was ever an instance of him encountering this Black Stone. I feel like the Black Stone fits perfectly into the Bran Mac Morn stories because it's a very sort of Celtic crossover with Cthulhu kind of feel to it, and I feel like this would have been a perfect place for that to have happened. But I'm going to reread through all these stories and see if I can pick it out and see if Jim Zub actually missed the mark a little bit on not including Bran Mac Morn, or if maybe he just never encountered it. But what I'm hoping to do, because Pulp Alley, again, one of my all-time favorite games, I'm hoping to put together a campaign for me and my friends, some of the local people here in town, and I have a few people here locally who are excited about wanting to learn this game as well too, and see just how prolific this game can be. Is I want to tell this story. I want to create these characters. I want to do crossover games. I want to have games that are set in the 1940s with hard-nosed detective crime stories with a twist of the occult and supernatural. I want to do historical adventures with Bran Mac Morn fighting against the Romans and the Celts. I want to do high seas pirate adventures with Conan, with Black Agnes, with Solomon Kane, right? I want to do these stories on the tabletop with Pulp Alley. And I think it will work beautifully because most of these stories, a majority of these stories, are very skirmish-based things. It's a few characters fighting against evil, and I think it would work really, really well. I think I'm gonna work as the game master in this situation. Normally, Pulp Alley can be played in a lot of different ways. It can be played solo, which I thoroughly enjoy. It can be played player versus player, head to head, 2 players or more. We've done it with lots of other people, creating their own leagues and trying to complete a scenario, all competing against each other. Or it can be done with players versus a game master. And I think in this situation, I will probably run the forces of the Black Stone, right? Everything from demonic forces to giant creepy animals, beasts, undead, all this kind of stuff. And I'm going to have the players, and I'll create all of this as well too. I'll create the characters for the heroes and the leagues and stuff, and have them, the players, sort of take on those roles and compete in scenarios against the forces of Blackstone. I'm very excited about this, but to me, I wanted to talk about how powerful Pulp Alley can be. Right, you can do fantasy with it, and sword and sorcery type fantasy, as well as like high fantasy, like Dungeons and Dragons. You can do historical adventures. I've done pirates, we've done westerns, we've done lots of other stuff with it. You can do historical meets supernatural kind of stuff, right? Solomon Kane fighting the forces of evil, like vampires and werewolves and that kind of aspect. Gothic horror. It does have a horror system built into it. You can download or buy a horror deck that when you encounter something that's horrific or monstrous, you draw from this deck to see how it affects your heroes. Sometimes it's a bad effect where they're paralyzed with fear. Sometimes they're steadfast in the face of this and they realize this is a force that needs to be contended with, and they'll fight against it even harder. It'll do science fiction. It will do science fiction from things like Star Trek or Star Wars, which we've done both. It'll do like pulp science fiction, things like John Carter of Mars. It's just a fantastic game. And really, the only thing you're changing is maybe changing the name of an ability. I've done it myself. So like when I created Conan, I created him as an epic character. And I've created him as a regular sort of league character as well too. But one of the things I've changed is I might change the fierce ability, right, which gives you a bonus to one of your skills or one of your abilities, and just change the name of it to Born on the Battlefield, right? It just gives you a much richer sort of sense of the game that you're playing and kind of immerses you a little bit further. And that's really all I've ever changed. I've added a few things here and there. I've worked on some Masters of the Universe stuff, so you could do Saturday morning cartoons with this if you wanted to. You know, with Masters of the Universe and He-Man, I created a perk or a gadget, a gear, a weapon, the Sword of Power. In that it's something that they carry, a piece of gear or gadget, some kind of a weapon, that if they're knocked out can be taken from them. Other things like abilities can't be taken from your characters, but that really those are little minor tweaks that I've made, and it really just emulates one of the other abilities. It's not like I really created anything new or had to like spawn any of my imagination. The imagination part comes naturally, but it's not like I had to sort of like rewrite the rules to make these things work. They're simply things that emulate another ability that's already available in the book. And a lot of times I just use this core book. The core rules are really all you'll ever need. There are tons of other adventures and campaign scenarios out there that you can buy. There are rules for vehicles that expand upon the vehicle rules that are in this book. Most of them, are almost all of them, I think actually all of them, are available for in PDF to just have printed out and bound if you want. You can also buy them in a printed format directly from the company. You can also buy the card decks that you'll need to play the game. But again, a lot of those are free or a small cost to download and just print them yourself. Stick them in card sleeves, you're ready to go. The power of Pulp Alley just far outweighs any other game I have ever played. And I'm excited to do this project because it's going to be a big project, right? The Battle of Blackstone. And it's going to cover a lot of stuff. I've found that the older I get, I affectionately call this gamer ADD, right? With as many games and stuff that's out there and the power of the internet and everything, I get distracted very easily. And I bounce from historicals to fantasy to science fiction to horror. And I think that this is going to be one of those things that's going to encompass all those things for me. I don't know how this is going to end. I've just started this project within the last couple of days, but I'm super excited about being able to do this and bring this to some of my friends. I will, if you haven't joined some of the Pulp Alley pages over on Facebook, I highly recommend that you do, because there's some great ideas, some great files for download. The Pulp Alley crew themselves, amazing couple of folks, and I think you'll have a great time experiencing this game. And it's my hope that it will rise to the top of all other sort of skirmish miniature games in your collection as well too. I've played a lot. I've played a lot of different skirmish games. I've played a lot of different miniature war games, role-playing games, and this encompasses all of that. I feel like Pulp Alley is sort of it can be a rules-light role-playing game. It can be a true skirmish miniatures game. It can be, you know, what you want it to be. Pulp Alley has it. It's the power of Pulp Alley. And I'm super excited and really geeked out over doing the Battle of Blackstone and encompassing all these characters. I'm starting to collect miniatures now for these different characters and their cohorts. I have most of the ones. I mean, I have a huge selection of miniatures anyway. That I've gathered over the years of playing. But I feel like there's only a few that I'm missing, and I'll find those via Reaper Miniatures or someplace else. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about how the Pulp Alley rule set can really fit any kind of genre you want to play, and don't let it fool you that this sort of like pulp era 1930s 1940s kind of thing, which it does beautifully, and don't discredit that. But I feel like no matter what it is that you enjoy, be it fantasy or science fiction or horror or pulp or westerns or historicals, this game can do it, and it does it really, really well. So, yeah, I'll keep you updated on my progress on this endeavor that I'm undertaking. I have a lot of figures to paint. I have a lot of figures to stat up, characters to stat up. But I'm excited about doing this and sharing this with my local friends, and I'll keep you updated on the progress and what's happening. Show you some of the painted figures and some of the stats that I have created for them. Some of the campaign and scenario ideas I've come up with as well. So until next time, my friends, please stay safe, and as always, game on.